think we're going to get slowly started. Welcome to our industry symposium. I'm Lisa Anderson. I'm the founder and CEO of Paragonix Technologies. Welcome to our symposium, Shifting Paradigms, Preservation Strategies to Improve Organ Utilization in Abdominal Transplantation. Now, before we go into the deep matter of liver preservation, I'd just like to share a few thoughts about our company. We are a medical device company. We're actually the only company making organ preservation devices for all 5 solid organs. We offer the Paragonix Sherpa Pack for donor heart preservation, the Liver Guard for donor liver preservation, our recently launched Kidney Vault, a novel renal perfusion device, actually 2 devices for lung, the Lung Guard and the Barrow Guard for advanced lung preservation, and our recently launched Pancreas Pack for advanced pancreas preservation. Now, in addition to our medical technology basis and offering, our company really rests on 3 additional columns. Number 1, we have a comprehensive digital environment and platform that seamlessly connects to all of our single-use disposable devices. Secondly, we offer transplant services for both thoracic as well as abdominal recovery. And third, we're really proud to have partnered with so many transplant centers running our Guardian series of registries for heart, lung, and liver transplantation. We currently follow close to 5,000 patients in the Guardian registry. Now, how far have we come and what is our vision for 2025? I'm really excited to share with you our most recent clinical milestone of having achieved over 10,000 supported transplant cases across lung, heart, liver, and services. Just last year, we did over 4,900, so close to 5,000 transplant cases. Why am I sharing this number? I'm sharing it with you because the Paragonix goal for 2025 is to support 10,000 transplants across all 5 solid organs, including services. This is a testament to the clinical community really seeing the need for our technologies and bringing these technologies into the transplant centers, organ procurement organizations to improve efficiencies, workflows, and reduce costs. We truly believe that an alignment between transplant centers, OPOs, and technology companies will very much be a very good combination for achieving that 60,000 transplants a year goal that we all have. Now, we're going to be sharing a lot of liver preservation data today, but I'd just like to highlight a talk on Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Given by Dr. Dhanireddy, where he will be diving deeper into much of the Guardian Liver Registry. So please join us on Sunday morning. A couple of very exciting announcements. First of all, we recently have launched the Pancreas Pack for advanced pancreas preservation. Tampa General Hospital actually performed the first in-human pancreas preservation case, and really excited to share with you that the Pancreas Pack is now available nationally, and we can support cases across the nation. In October of 2024, our company received FDA clearance for a novel kidney perfusion device called Kidney Vault. We have this device here at this conference. Please join us at our booth for a demo and for sharing more information about this technology. Really excited to share with you that several OPOs across the country now are offering this device for donor kidneys that you might be looking at. Really excited to also share that this technology is the first of its kind and can fly commercially while still transmitting all of the perfusion parameters during transport. So what I'd like you to take away from this is that we finally have technology and really putting that control back into your hands, where you can ask every OPO in the country for every kidney, we do want this kidney to be pumped end to end and have real-time monitoring throughout the entire journey of the kidney. Without much further ado, I'd like to introduce our medical director, Dr. Jake Miles, who will introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lisa. It is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Kiran Dhanireddy, who is the Vice President and Chief of the Tampa General Hospital Transplant Institute. Dr. Dhanireddy and his team have been pioneers in the liver transplant space, leveraging advanced donor preservation for livers to expand program growth as well as expand the donor pool. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Kiran Dhanireddy.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Jake, and thanks for everyone coming to join us during lunch. I'm going to talk about our recent experience in the last 2+ years as we've adopted advanced preservation and perfusion technologies and have been able to grow our liver transplant program using higher risk donors from farther away. I have spoken for Paragonix, Organox, and CareDx, and I won't be talking about any off-label use of the LiverGuard device. So we all know in transplantation that cold ischemic time has been correlated with worse post-transplant clinical outcomes in liver transplant, and particularly for older donors, steatotic donors, and DCD organs. We have all been subject to the winds of allocation changes over the last several years that have taken what historically had been a mostly local resource and regionalized and nationalized that, and have had to deal with the challenges of prolonged periods of transportation for the organs that are allocated to us. What we have seen in liver as well as in other organs is that moderate hypothermic preservation at 4 to 6 degrees centigrade can mitigate some of the injurious effect of static cold storage on ice and therefore allow for longer preservation times in cold storage. Lisa mentioned that we're going to talk on Sunday morning about the Guardian Liver Registry data. Current national enrollment is 745 patients, and so a robust data set really to look at ice versus LiverGuard as a means for hypothermic preservation. So with a propensity-matched cohort of brain-dead donors looking at site, meld, and ischemic time, there is a strong indication for reduction of EAD and a reduction of AKI and the need for new hemodialysis in that cohort that is approaching statistical significance. And what we can say is that if you look at a predicted probability of early allograft dysfunction and correlate that to time, across all periods of cold storage, LiverGuard seems to reduce the incidence of early allograft dysfunction. So that's a sneak peek of the data that's going to be presented on Sunday. Now I'll dive into our Tampa General Hospital specific data and tell a little bit about the story of our liver transplant program over the last several years. If you look at the volumes from 2019 to 2021, we were a moderately large liver transplant program doing about 150 liver transplants a year with really very little use of DCD organs. And what we have seen over the course of 2023 and 2024 is a significant increase in the number of DCDs, which is really where our entire growth has come from. So from 2022 to 2023, we grew 25% to a total of 209 transplants. We started a living donor program and did 5 living donors. And then in 2024, we did 279 transplants, which was a 33% increase over 23 and a 70% increase over the course of those 2 years. Brain-dead donor volume actually shrunk across the country last year, 5.6%. And after the meeting or this evening at the bar, we can talk about why that might have happened. But I think that what we are all experiencing is the need to become experts in DCD organ transplantation in order to continue to improve access for our patients. And so the strategies we've used to expand the donor pool and facilitate volume growth and utilize more DCDs is really to rethink our philosophy around organ acceptance. And this has been a very dynamic process over the last several years, and is reflected by all of my colleagues and friends and experts in the audience that we are using more advanced donor age organs. We are getting organs from farther away. Macrosteatosis and its injurious effect has been mitigated by technology. We use high-risk DCDs, so we've liberalized age, we've liberalized the definition of functional warm ischemic time, and then we have really worked on the logistics around the most pressing situation for OPOs and the thing that causes them the most anxiety, which is late decline of organs either shortly before the OR or intraoperative declines of the organs. And so advanced preservation technology, normothermic machine perfusion, and its strengths, organ viability assessment, logistics and time shifting, really have transformed our liver transplant program, and we are exclusively an Organox perfusion program, and we, at this point, perfuse 100% of our organs. We have added advanced hypothermic preservation through the use of LiverGuard, and really what I'm here to tell the story of is that the combination of those two technologies have been transformative for us at TGH. So after 40+ years of static cold storage and ice, our program looked very much like it did in terms of philosophy and technology at the beginning of 2022. And in October of 2022, we started a back-to-base Organox machine perfusion program with the traditional static cold storage to bring organs back to TGH, put them on the Mitra L device, assess their viability, and then proceed to transplant. Honestly, my friends around the country criticized the back-to-base model, and I had vigorous debates with them about the consequences of cold storage prior to NMP. And 2 years on, we're still having that conversation vigorously in our community. And I hope that our experience will contribute to the knowledge about that. But we have experience using many of the Paragonix devices, and we first use the Sherpa Pack for heart transplant. And my colleague and friend, Lucian Lozonsky, who runs the heart transplant program, and I were talking about our PGD problem in heart. So primary graft dysfunction in heart is really consequential for patients. They come out of the transplant on ECMO, they stay in the hospital longer, they consume a lot of resources. And what he said is ice freezes the right ventricle because it's the thinnest part of the heart. And if we use this new technology that stores the heart at a higher temperature, it won't freeze the right ventricle. We implemented it wholesale in our heart transplant program from that day, and we reduced our PGD problem from 22% down to less than 5%. And so with that background of implementation of new preservation technology, we applied the same principle to the liver, and we started using LiverGuard as an adjunct to mitigating the injurious effects of static cold storage on ice, and that's our third era. And so I'm going to go through the data, really comparing those three eras and where we stand now in our understanding and approach to growing transplant volume. So the TGH model, we're going to look at our specific data from 61 historical cases on ice, 42 cases of ice plus NMP, and now 101 cases of LiverGuard plus NMP. And compare really the rates of early allograft dysfunction and acute kidney injury, realizing that those are two of the clinical parameters that are most correlated with injury of preservation. And then the consequence of acute kidney injury really drives a lot of the clinical outcomes for patients in terms of how long they stay in the ICU, how long they stay in the hospital, and what their long-term outcomes are. So if you look at the baseline characteristics of these three cohorts and concentrate really on ice and then ice plus NMP, our donor age did increase a bit from 41 to 47 years old when we implemented our NMP program. Macrosteatosis, we've still historically been fairly conservative in our program about the use of grafts more than 30% steatotic. And we still didn't find that we needed to use a lot of DCDs in the course of late 2022 and 2023 in order to overcome our learning curve with NMP, and also as we, as a team, aligned around a new philosophy of organ utilization. And the recipient age, MELD score, and surgery length tended to be the same. So if you look then at our third era, really comparing our period of ICE plus NMP versus liver guard from NMP, you see multiple things happening simultaneously. We, along with the rest of the field, developed expertise and confidence and comfort with the use of the technology, and the adjunct utilization of liver guard allowed us to contemplate using older donors. Still don't use many steatotic donors, frankly, but really it radically increased the number of DCDs we were using. And then also we're able to drive down our median MELD score at transplant by providing more access, which is part of the story around resource utilization. And my transplant administrator and colleague Anderson Brabson is going to talk a little bit about that. So if you look at the procurement and the surgical variables, ICE plus NMP, this is really a reflection of our organ acceptance philosophy. And remember, this is still early in our experience. We're developing comfort, and we're thinking about how to use the technology in a safe way. And so much of the variables around distance to organ, preservation time, cold ischemic time really didn't change. We added NMP to what we had historically been doing with static cold storage direct to transplant. And then if you look at ICE plus NMP versus liver guard from NMP and realize that there's a significant error effect, we had the confidence to use the technology to go farther. So 483 nautical mile median distance compared to really 184, 174. The total preservation time increased, and I think that we've seen this around the world, that the more comfort there is with NMP, the longer livers tend to stay on there. The cold ischemic time increased by about 2 hours, and that's really reflective of our confidence in the technology to mitigate the injury of cold storage. NMP time, as I said, increased, and the organs were preserved at 5.6 degrees centigrade rather than what has historically been seen in static cold storage, which is very close to 0 degrees centigrade at the surface temperature of the liver. So if you look at recovery distance on the left and stratify both, or look at a cohort of DBD and DCD, you see kind of what our historical practice was. And those two box and whiskers under DBD is the ICE versus the ICE plus NMP. So very similar in terms of recovery distance. And this graphically shows that once we implemented liver guard, the recovery distance increased significantly, both for DBD and DCD organs. And that story is paralleled, as you would expect, with the cold ischemic times. And for DBDs, we historically had been a little bit more liberal, just like the rest of us are, in terms of how long DBDs could sit in ice. And so you see that there's a fairly wide spread of what the preservation times are if you look at the DBDs. And then a longer cold preservation time with even more distribution of those cases out to longer than 10, even to 12 hours. For DCDs, you know, the historical anxiety around prolonged cold preservation really kept those time periods short, and did a lot to try to get DCD organs on NMP quickly, just like we had historically tried to get them transplanted quickly. And then once we implemented liver guard, not only did the cold ischemic time increase for DCDs, but several DCDs well over 8, approaching 10 hours, which had been an unthinkable circumstance even just a couple of years ago. So if you look at our historical practice in terms of geography, we mostly transplanted organs from the state of Florida and from the historical UNOS Region 3, which was really the southeast, and had transplanted one organ from Puerto Rico. If you look at that cohort of ICE plus NMP, it really looks very similar to our geographic reach prior to machine perfusion. And maybe a couple more organs from Puerto Rico, but really still clustered primarily in the state of Florida and in the southeast. And we have transformed our program and our geographic reach and our access to organs through the utilization of the combination of LiverGuard and machine perfusion with Organox. And you can see that we're really not a Florida or Southeast liver transplant program any longer, and that many of those cases that we do now are from that light orange ring, which includes much of the Midwest. It includes Texas. We've even gone as far as Arizona in sending organs back to Tampa, putting them on NMP back to base, and then transplanting them. So the clinical outcomes in terms of the index hospital admission, if you look at ICE versus ICE plus NMP, the clinical outcomes don't look that different in terms of incidence of EAD or AKI or new hemodialysis. And there's multiple factors there, I think, why we're not seeing a strong or profound difference just from the utilization of NMP. But we did have a philosophical shift in terms of the types of organs that we were using, the number of DCDs that we were using in that era. That era was relatively short because of the conversation about whether the back-to-base model is a viable model against device to donor. And so if you look at the LiverGuard plus NMP model era compared to the ICE plus NMP era, you see a reduction in peak AST and ALT, a reduction in the incidence of EAD, and then similar AKI and new hemodialysis. Our ICU length of stay pretty stable as a reflection of kind of the cohort of patients that we transplant, and our hospital length of stay overall is the same amongst the three eras. If you look at our clinical outcomes for 6 months, they're excellent in all of the eras in the data set in terms of non-anastomotic or ischemic cholangiopathy related strictures. 0%. Hemodialysis, really pretty much the same, and then overall graft survival of 100% in the data set. What you can see is that LiverGuard mitigates the incidence of EAD in a 100% NMP program like Tampa General Hospital. So regardless of the time, the use of LiverGuard decreases the amount of EAD, and you can see that our utilization of LiverGuard allowed for much longer cold ischemic times than we had data for in the ICE plus NMP cohort. And so if you concentrate really on taking NMP out of the consideration and a sub-analysis really of ICE plus NMP with a median NMP time of 9.8 hours versus a LiverGuard plus NMP with an NMP time of 10.4 hours. So really holding NMP as a constant, we see that the improvement in clinical outcomes still holds with a 58% reduction in EAD, implying that much of that injury to the liver was contingent on static cold storage and the freezing of liver tissue. And then if you allow NMP to be a continuous variable, you still see that at every time point of NMP, whether it's shorter or longer, there is the reduction of EAD. And what that hardwires in my thinking is that NMP cannot undo the injury associated with static cold storage. And once the liver tissue is frozen, whether you reperfuse the liver in a patient or on the pump, that injury is evident, and it's evident in transaminase elevation in the recipient post-transplant. So if you look at our DCD sub-analysis, you see that we have a 35% reduction in EAD, somewhat shorter ICU length of stay, and excellent graft survival. So I'll just conclude by saying that we're very fortunate, and I feel fortunate to have great partners in both Paragonix for LiverGuard and Organox for NMP, and we're very much committed to the combination of those two technologies, which facilitate a significant increase in our geographic reach for livers, allows us the luxury of a longer cold ischemic time, even with marginal organs, a significant participation in the national growth of DCDs, and the utilization of more marginal and older organs, with really improvement of early allograft dysfunction, trending reductions in AKI, and excellent 6-month outcomes with 100% graft survival. So I'll pause there, and I'll take questions at the end after the next talk. Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce our second speaker, Anderson Brabson, who's the Vice President of the Tampa General Hospital Transplant Institute. Anderson has been instrumental in the integration of new technologies at Tampa General over the past 5 years to support much of the growth that Dr. Dhanireddy has just mentioned. So please join me in welcoming Anderson.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anderson Brabson, and I'm going to talk a little bit more from an administrator perspective, how we've put this program into place. I have no relevant disclosures for this presentation. So you got a little bit of a timeline from Dr. Dhanireddy with regards to our liver transplant program and how we really started on this journey in 2021. And we made a strategic decision to implement technology into our program to grow our liver transplant volume while maintaining excellent clinical outcomes. And so that's remained our primary goal year over year. In 2023, when we were looking towards bringing in advanced preservation technology, we also wanted to consider how could we improve our transplant logistics and potentially move towards daytime transplants only. And again, always looking to figure out how to do this in a cost-effective and financially sustainable way. So we had a lot of different tactics to consider when we were going into 2023. There's a lot of, for all of us, there's a lot of different departments that we work with throughout our organizations that we can have actually a positive or a negative effect on those departments. So the first one I think everyone is always interested in and is how do you maintain financial sustainability when you're bringing in technology that's potentially very expensive. So we're constantly working and have some examples later in the presentation as to how we're trying to balance that with offsetting it with reduction in expenses in other areas within our program. Staffing is always a concern when you're implementing new programs. We worked really hard to leverage our existing staff. A couple of examples of that with regards to bringing in some of this new technology is, we had such buy-in from our entire clinical team that we were able to have individuals on our clinical team help with putting these programs into place, so we didn't have to hire all brand new staff. We were looking at how can we create some OR efficiencies. At this time, we were post-COVID. Our teams were burnout. Turnover was kind of high in the OR. So as we were working towards bringing in technology and seeing that it potentially could allow us to move to daytime transplants, that was really kind of a relief on the OR. It, of course, caused some other concerns. How are they going to manage moving other surgeries out when we needed more of their time. So I think the really important part here is when we were putting this program into place, we were constantly balancing and looking at ways to be creative so that we could move forward. So this is a look back over the last 6 years of our program. This does not include our kidney transplant program data. So this is just liver, lung, heart, and transplant. And you can see prior to the introduction of NMP as well as preservation technology, our volumes were about static for a couple of years. And as we introduced technology into our program, there was pretty much a direct correlation to an increase in the number of transplants we were doing. So the far graph or the far bar on the right was calendar year 24. Again, not including kidney, we went from pretty much zero a couple of years ago to 94% utilization of technology. This is data directly from our liver transplant program. So big concern, again, bringing in technology. How is this going to affect our bottom line? How are we going to get this approved by our organization? We have seen that, and 2024 data is not on here. I think, as most of you know, there's a big lag in data, and there's a lot going on with the payers and using more repricers. So it takes us sometimes up to 15 months to get the data. But it looks like the trend is going in the same direction into 2024. But you can see that the introduction of technology in around 2022, you see a change in the yellow line, which is the sum of our contribution margin. So we have been seeing, it seems to be an increase in the contribution margin per case, as well as the overall contribution margin of our liver transplant program. And that is a direct correlation to an increase in our transplant volume. So we brought in technology, we adopted it as quickly as we could safely, and that directly resulted in an increase in liver transplant volume, and we're seeing that it is not eroding our financial margins. So that was all really good news. That in conjunction to all the changes that we made within our program, I think the same slide was presented by Dr. Dhanireddy, but we had a lot of changes in our program through the introduction of this technology. We expanded our donor pool. The team was accepting more marginal organs from further away. And when we went back and looked at this in conjunction with some of the other information that we had, the big area that stood out to us was we're traveling further. And the organization is going to say to us, if you're traveling further, your transportation costs are going to increase. And they're going to increase significantly. So we were, again, pulling all of this data together, having conversations on the administrative and the clinical side, knowing that we were going to have a little bit of a struggle on the administrative side and what was going on clinically, and with them seeing that there was an increase in ischemic time. We were going to have an additional 2 hours potentially to work with. And how do we use that to our benefit? So this is a slide that just kind of re-illustrates that the data was showing us that we were able to maintain our outcomes by the introduction of LiverGuard. And we had an extension in the ischemic time. So again, the question we asked ourselves is, what can we do with this extra potential 2 hours that we have to get a liver from a donor hospital to our hospital? So you've already seen a map of the state of Florida. So we went, and this is data just about the state of Florida. So we were trying to look at where we were with regards to transportation. The two blue boxes combined is less than 250 nautical mile radius from our hospital. And that's a majority of our liver transplants. So we decided to focus on that area. So the boxes in red on the left correlate to the boxes in red on the right. And you can see that if we focused on that group of livers that were equaled over 60% of the organs that we were bringing to our organization, there was a huge potential for cost savings if we were able to figure out a way to potentially make a change in our program and go from flying organs to driving those organs. So we made a decision to do that. And we made it very quickly, meaning that we picked a point in time and we decided to stop flying all of those organs because all the clinical data had told us that it was okay to have that extra 2 hours. So we made the decision, and you can see that our flight costs went to 0 overnight. So this is a visual representation of what our driving radius used to look like at Tampa General Hospital. So the gray is where we used to drive, and everything in white we used to fly. So we had also moved towards using local procurement post-COVID. So we had local procurement. So our team was not having to travel out to procure organs. We had the clinically proven extension of ischemic times that was safe and maintained our clinical outcomes. And our team was focusing on transplanting all the patients in our community and on our wait list that needed to be transplanted. So a few years ago, we had just ICE, which was the blue dots. Then we had ICE plus NMP, the green dots. And this data is from the Guardian Registry. And you can see that during this particular cohort, there were 26 livers that were flown to Tampa General. Then we implemented the use of the Liver Guard, and those 26 flights turned into 26 car rides. And this is data from our program over the exact same period of time. And so we saw over a $90,000 reduction in our transportation costs during this time, which equates to about $1 million a year. So we use this case study because I think it's really important that we're always looking at what else can we do when we bring this technology like this into our organization, because our organizations are going to question us. Because often the medical director of the program says, I want to use this technology because it shows great clinical benefits. Well, if you have to write a business plan and take it forward to your organization, they want more than that. So they want to know, how are you going to implement it? And then what are some of the things you're going to do to mitigate the risk? And in the case of perfusion and preservation technology, a lot of the risk that they're concerned about is financial. So we're constantly working together, the administrative and the clinical side, to understand what we're learning on a pretty much day-by-day basis with regards to the implementation of this technology, and how do we stay nimble, and how do we pivot and make changes that can result in keeping the organization happy. So again, I was showing on the slide this, when we went into kind of this project, we never thought that we were going to be driving livers from around the state. We didn't, it just kind of came as the project developed. So in conclusion, ICE was our baseline. Donor risk, we had an increase in donor risk with the addition of NMP, and then further increase with the addition of LiverGuard. With the addition of NMP, we maintained the range in which we were getting donor organs, but we expanded the range when we added in LiverGuard. Our transplant volume, we go from baseline, it was 25% increase when we added NMP. Then we added LiverGuard, we had another 33% increase. Our clinical outlines from baseline were maintained when we added NMP, and then the addition of LiverGuard. You saw from the slides earlier that Dr. Dhanireddy presented, there were some improvements. And then our transportation costs with ICE, that was our baseline. We added NMP, it was maintained, and with the addition of LiverGuard, we've actually decreased those. So I think it's the combination of both LiverGuard and NMP that has allowed us to really transform our program and grow as much as we have. Thank you.